Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about functions or procedures. So you should have gotten some notes that look like mine do over here on the right hand side, and we're going to talk about what functions and procedures are and then how we define them. So we can do some pretty neat things with programming, like complicated math expressions like we've done in our if statements, and manipulating strings in all sorts of ways. Sometimes we can come up with a bit of code that's so neat that we want to reuse it over and over. And as we start developing our programs, you're going to find that we are going to have quite a bit of functions, quite a bit of areas of our code that, we're going to want to replicate or call upon later on if something happens. And so that's why we're going to be looking at something called procedures. So here in our programming language, you're going to see something called procedures, or also known as, and I'm just going to type this in, so bear with me, it's going to probably change some of my formatting here, but they're also known as functions, methods, I'm going to delete some of this, or you might even hear something called subroutines. For this class, however, we're going to use the terms procedure. So you might hear me say procedure, or probably more likely you're going to hear me say functions. And basically, all this is a collection of information that can be used over and over again. We just have to declare it. We have to, what we would say, define it, and then create it, and then it's just going to sit there until we call upon it in our program. So in JavaScript language, which we're doing, there are going to be multiple ways to define procedures. One way is to create a function definition or procedure definition. So depending on if you call it function or procedure, a function definition. And I'm going to use this something where you would see more in straight JavaScript versus our standard or our area over here, maybe on the left, where we have more block coding. But if we were going to do something like straight coding, you might see something where, hey, you have the word function. That's basically saying, hey, this area or this section of code is going to be a function, meaning a chunk of information. We are going to call it sing bingo. So this is the name of my function or procedure. And then these are the commands that are within it. So print line in JavaScript is meaning you're just going to print it out to like your console log. And here it would be console log. So if I wanted to do this, you would see, if you look over here on my left side of my screen, you're going to see functions here. And we're not actually returning anything. So you might see function, my function, and we're going to name it. Like I said in our notes, it could be sing bingo. Notice it has opening and closing parentheses. So if I showed it in text, it would look like that, where we'd have the word function, the name of the function or procedure, and then opening, closing curly brackets. So anything between this opening curly bracket right here and that closing curly bracket right there. So I'm going to go back to show. And then here we had print line, but because we're using, if we were doing it in the app lab here, you could just use console log. And so I'm going to find console log if I can find it. Sorry, I have a lot of options here. Here it is. And they said, hey, we're going to actually do bingo, and we could have exclamation point. And I'm really not lazy, work smarter, not harder. So I'm going to copy and paste. Oops. Now, notice that I'm doing every line that I want executed to be a new line. That's just good programming practice. You could make these all one line. I mean, I could have console log here, here. It's just, again, it makes it a little bit harder to see. And so I like to keep any line that I want to be executed. I create a new line for it. So B-I, N, G. Oh. Now, I don't have any line breaks, so it is going to be one line. So here's my function that I created. And notice it does give me a little yellow square or triangle here that just says, hey, I've defined it, but I haven't called upon it in my program. So I'm just going to show blocks here. So it's just sitting there, waiting to be used. Same with this one. It's just sitting there waiting to be used. So once we have defined that function or created the procedure or created the function, or you can call it procedure, we can now call upon it. And that's the most important thing. If we create a function, we have to call upon it. If we don't call upon it, it never gets used and it's just sitting in our code. So to call upon a function in JavaScript, you just call upon the name of the function. So again, my function was named sing-a-bingo, and so every time I call upon it, it's going to do that. So if I did that here, right now my function is just sitting there, and I personally like to put my functions at the end and do all my heavy work, everything that I want my program to do at the top. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to functions, and I'm going to call upon it. And so I can bring it up to the top, and I might actually give myself some spacing here so you can see. So this is me creating my function. Some people like to put all their functions at the top and then have all of their code, like what your program is actually going to be focusing on. And I usually call it like our driving code. Some people put that at the bottom, but I prefer to put all of the code that's actually where I want my program to be focused on at the top. So I have my function, and the name of my function is called sing-bingo. And so basically when I run this, it's going to go to this sing-bingo, and it's going to say, hey, what is that function? And it drops down to line 7, finds out what that is doing, and runs it. So let's see if I can move this over here. And I'm going to drag this up if I can. Sorry, there's so much here. Let's see if I can. Here we go. Move this up so you can see my console log. And when I run, it's going to do, oh, great. It did actually put it on new line. So awesome. Oh, it's because I have every individual console log as an individual. So it's great. Now, if I want more, if I want to do this more, I can, again, call upon it again. I can call upon it as many times as I want. Like I said, I like every line I want my program to execute. I like it on its own line. So I do it that way. If you want to show blocks, you can. And I'm going to hit reset run. And now it will do that as many times as I call upon the function. So you can see it there. So again, I like to put my functions below my driving area of my program, meaning the main part of my program that's actually doing the work. And then what it does is it just calls upon sing-bingo and goes, oh, I got to look for the function. That drops down to line 9, finds the function, and does everything in it. And that's how a function works. So if I was going to look at here, this one's a little bit different. And if I make this a little bit bigger, I have a function called knock. I have a function called who's. I have a function called bananas. And this one is a little bit different. So again, like I said, how depending on how you like to put your functions, if you want to put them at the top and then call upon them with your code there, that's up to you. Just make sure you put in your code. So here how I put, hey, these are my creating my function and these are calling upon. Just make sure you put that in your comments. So calling function. And again, you can put that at the top, which I prefer to do, but you can also do it at the bottom. So if I show blocks again and reset run, it will do the same thing. So it's more of a preference. You just got to be consistent. So if you want all your functions at the top, great. If you want them after, and then do all your major work at the top, that's up to you. So here, this one calls upon knock. And so it's going to print out knock knock, and then it's going to print out who's there, and then it's going to print out banana, and it's going to have a picture of some kind of banana, I think. And then it's going to go back to knock knock, who's there, orange, and they'll print out orange, and then it'll print out orange who, and then it'll print out orange who. Glad I didn't say banana. So imagine how painfully long that would be if we didn't have all of these functions. If I had to call upon banana or code banana and actually draw a banana or whatever that picture is, I think it actually is a banana, and do all these print lines separately and not just call upon banana multiple times here, it could be quite intensive and it could be very convoluted. And so creating functions allows us to call upon things multiple times without having to retype them. And that's the power of having those functions or procedures. So inside of our computer, again, it calls upon that, so that's the most important thing. If you don't ever call upon your function, it's just sitting there, and then it's just extra code that you don't need. So please make sure that if you are creating functions, that you do call upon them, and then if you don't plan on calling upon them, then eventually, as you start going through your draft of work, you should probably get rid of those functions if in fact you don't use them. And so again, this is what I just did in my area over in code.org here. So what does pseudocode look like? You might see it where it says procedure. So that's the difference in JavaScript or in code.org. You might see the word function. But here you're going to see procedure. So I just wanted you to be aware. Again, you are going to have the name after the word function or procedure, opening and closing parentheses. And eventually we are going to be having things that we can return and use for our functions. But for right now, it's not returning anything, meaning we're not trying to grab some kind of value from it. We're just having or calling upon the instructions to do so. And then notice we have our opening and closing parentheses. So you might have something like this where it says procedure sing bingo, and then it's going to display, and then we call upon it. And these should actually have, actually because it's pseudocode, you don't necessarily need the semicolons, but you might see semicolons in there. So testing our knowledge, you might see this. Where you have procedure A, it's going to display those. And then at the very end, what is it going to display here? It would just display this Morse code for send F. Same with this one. Take a look, see if you can work through that. But notice, hey, this is the make layer. So it does display this, like cook noodles, make sauce, mix eggs and regatta, and then it tells you to do this how many times? 1, 2, 3. So you would repeat this step of spreading 2 cups of sauce 3 times. And then if we were looking at this one's just only a part 1. So here is what Simone might be doing, where she made little emojis for how she feels for the week. But then after writing, she decides to change the smiley face to something a little more sophisticated. And this is just asking how many times the lines of code would she have to change it. And so if I'm looking for one that looks similar, it would be right here for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So she would actually have to change it 3 times and actually copy and paste. But at some point, she could probably even make a procedure where she could just call upon that versus having to retype it or copy and paste. So right now, these are pretty simple procedures or functions where, yeah, copying and pasting maybe doesn't seem so hard. But if we had, let's say, 200 lines of code and trying to navigate through that and copying and pasting multiple times, that might get a little cumbersome. So just remember, procedures are here to make our lives easier. It's here to streamline and make our code more efficient, as well as be able to call upon things multiple times so we don't have to retype them. If you have any questions as you go through Unit 4, Lesson 9 and 10, please let me know. But this should help get you started with how functions/procedures work in programming.